Verdict came out in the Derek Chauvin case, and it was convictions on all 3 counts. Some people were surprised, some not so surprised. A lot of people were very happy about that in different corners of our country. And so today we're going to go through a little bit of the aftermath. What happened? What was some of the fallout as a result of this conviction, as a result of the trial? We spent a lot of time on this channel taking a deep dive into the Derek Chauvin George Floyd case. And so now we want to see how is this landing? How is society, how is America responding to this new outcome? And so I want to start by going through some pictures and some articles over from the Daily Mail. This is one image we saw yesterday, Tuesday afternoon, right outside of the Cup Foods. So Cup Food, this is really like literally right where the whole situation went down. This is in Minneapolis. Cup Foods is right over here. And we see, big memorials for Floyd. A lot of people hugging, a lot of, people sort of dancing, clapping in the air. Very happy, very excited. We've got, a sign saying no justice, no streets. The sort of the BLM fist is being raised into the air. And so a lot of people are very happy about it. Daily Mail is noting that cheers rang out across America from Minnesota to New York City on Tuesday afternoon as thousands celebrated. And they're sort of, this is the culmination of the BLM movement. And we have a lot of months, the summer unrest months over last year. And so it's all sort of, this is the end point of that, hopefully. People are hoping anyways. Biden, Obama, and other senior Democrats vowed to make Floyd's death a turning point in civil rights. We've seen a lot of that come out thus far, right? We're talking about racial equity now. We're seeing a lot of the critical race theory. A lot of the civil rights stuff is coming back. Biden phoned Floyd's family outside of court to pledge that he was going to work to change the course of history. We have people were, sort of out there taking the streets. National Guard in Minneapolis were able to stand down finally after weeks of on tenterhooks is what they're saying. So yeah, they got to stand down because the people got the verdict that they wanted. They were there in case it went the other way, sort of a little bit of a threat there. If this is not a guilty verdict, well, the National Guard may have been called into play, but because it was convictions across the board, they can now stand down. Floyd's family held a press conference. 6-year-old daughter was among them. We have pictures of that. "We are able to breathe again," said his younger brother, Philanese. Justice for George means freedom for all. Far-left Democrats, including AOC and Ilhan Omar, claim that this is not justice. So, they want sort of more as a result. And Biden's Attorney General said that they are opening up a sweeping investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department. So if you were a part of Minneapolis Police Department and you thought, oh my gosh, finally, this is about to be over. We've been living under this burden for a year now. Finally, we're going to get some closure on this. Not so fast there, because you have the other 3 officers who are scheduled for their court, I think August 23rd. I don't know if that's a trial or a final trial management conference or something to that effect, but they're coming up. And now you have the federal government who's parachuting into Minneapolis, and they're going to be opening up a sweeping investigation into the Minneapolis PD. So we'll see what that does to the police department there, whether officers stick around or not. We have some more images, a lot of happiness and glee from around the country. Here's a woman cheers from outside the courthouse. So a lot of those COVID precautions are now not so much in effect. A lot of media, you're going to see a lot of cameras all over the place, right? People are documenting this. It's sort of a historic moment for a lot of people. And I saw a lot of images. It was really funny. I don't think we clipped any of them here today because this is sort of the mainstream, news stuff. But there were some images on Twitter of photographers behind rows of photographers behind rows of photographers, all with somebody posing, taking, fist in the air, whatever, taking, it was all very, very Instagrammable, if you want to use that term. And so, people were memorializing this. It's a big victory for them. All right. So, good for you. Okay, fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. I think that this was a tragic thing for our country across the board. I don't know that either side is better off as a result of this thing. I think the justice system largely feels like both sides have a little bit less faith in it. I'm not sure that either side really thought that this was a fair trial. We had a one side who was demanding a particular outcome. You had another side who was concerned that there wasn't, due process that was being afforded, and sort of a back and forth both directions. One side won, but I'm not sure that the country won on the whole of things. Here's another image where there's people, there's power. So again, this is in the nearby area. This is George Floyd Square, the intersection where the fatal arrest took place in May last year. So there's a whole square now. More images from outside of Cup Foods, right? We all remember this. The police vehicle was like right here, and we saw a lot of movement throughout this area. A lot of people all there, close proximity. So celebrating. Here's George Floyd's daughter. Didn't hear much about her throughout the last course of the year, but here she is at a press conference along with other members of the family. Here is Terrence Floyd. Said, I will miss him, but now I know he's in history. What a day to be a Floyd man. Yeah, so families making do as a result of their loss. And Derek Chauvin is off to prison, so we've got some more info on what's going on with him. He's pictured in a prison jumpsuit. You can see him here, sort of in the oranges. The facial expression there, I'm not sure. Looks kind of dead inside, right? He's pictured in a jumpsuit. He's going to Oak Park Heights maximum security prison, where he's placed on suicide watch ahead of sentencing in 8 weeks. So probably, I don't think that there's really anything that has triggered that. Kind of just a standard precaution, given the fact that he's facing a very serious consequence here. Minnesota DOC released a new booking photo. Woke up from his first night in Oak Park Heights. He's being watched closely by guards to ensure his safety, not just a suicide risk, but also from other inmates, many of whom resent law enforcement, maybe threats to him, many of the other inmates there. Cheers erupted outside the courthouse as he was found guilty. He faces a minimum sentence of 12 and a half years and a maximum of 40 years. Former cop is expected to file a swift appeal. Took celebrations across the country. Biden called. Merrick Garland called. Jem Bruton, former warden of Oak Park Heights, described in his 2004 book about the prison how the hierarchy among inmates is determined by the crime committed. So you have sort of this hierarchy in prison based upon the severity of the crime. At the top of the scale are those who have killed a law enforcement officer. At the bottom are sex offenders, child molesters. They're considered lowest of the low. This hierarchy, coupled with Chauvin's infamy as a police officer, means he will undoubtedly require bolstered protection and constant monitoring. And then once again, this is an image of course, Derek Chauvin and the prison where he will be housed for the foreseeable future. And, they get very dramatic in these articles. No prisoner has ever escaped from Oak Park Heights, which houses around 500 of the most dangerous inmates in the state. Okay, great. 25 miles east of Minneapolis on the border with Wisconsin. That's kind of a tongue twister there. Chauvin is being closely watched by guards to ensure his safety and severity, being protected from other inmates. This is what the inside of the cell looks like. This is a medical cell. Chauvin is expected to be held at the prison until his sentencing. So this is medical. That doesn't look like a jail facility. This is another image from inside from Oak Park Heights. So about what you would expect, right? Typically brighter than what you see in the TV shows. TV shows and the movies is like this dark, gloomy scene. They're pretty well lit in there. You want to see what's going on inside these facilities. And there was some speculation about Derek Chauvin and what he wrote on his hand. So everybody's kind of watching yesterday as the verdict was being announced to see his facial expressions. What does the attorney do? It's a really just awkward situation where you're kind of like, oh, well, all right, this is what happened. So, they're gonna take you now. Sorry. It's a really troubling thing as a defense lawyer to have to sort of there's no good way to do this, right? And so everybody's watching, how did this go? You lean over, give him a hug, pat him on the shoulder, what's the deal? So he kind of just, all right, this is it. So what did Derek Chauvin write on his hand, right? There's something here that was he was sort of scribbling as the government moved to revoke his bond. He's guilty on all three counts. Government, any motions from the state? Yeah, Your Honor, move to revoke bond and remand. All right, yes, granted. He goes into custody, scribbles something on his hand. Well, what the heck was that? Here is what he wrote down. It was his lawyer's phone number. He wrote on his hand, according to the New York Post. Chauvin's lawyer, Eric Nelson, confirmed with TMZ that his client wrote down the number in anticipation of having his bail revoked, which it was following the guilty verdict on all counts. Photograph showing him being escorted out. Writing can be seen on his left palm. Faces a maximum 40 years in prison. So kind of an interesting. It's like, was he not expecting that at all? Like, he didn't have a business card. He'd been working with this guy for a year now. Did he not have his phone number? Kind of a weird thing to write down at the last minute. So here is Ben Crump, and they were recording the call from the Bidens.
Hello. Hello. Hey, how you doing?
How's Gianna doing?
Feeling better now. Nothing is going to make it all better, but at least God, now there's some justice.
Right.
And I think Gianna's coming. My dad is going to change the world. He's going to start to change it now.
That's right.
Yes. Amen.
He's going to change it now.
Right. So Joe Biden's doing his little old man thing, we're going to change it now is what he said. And we're going to change it. At least there's justice. At least there's justice. We're going to change this world. All right. So yeah, which is hilarious because Joe Biden, of course, as we know here on this channel, we hold them accountable. 1994 crime bill, 1984, 1986, 1988, all responsible from Joe Biden. He said that any crime bill that came out of Congress since like 1976, guess whose name it had on it? Joe Biden's. That's according to his own statement, his own testimony. So there is no single person in this country, in my opinion, who's more responsible for the current state of our justice system than Joe Biden. Second in hierarchy there is Kamala Harris. So these two yahoos are now out there at the forefront screaming about criminal justice reform when they are directly responsible. They are the chief architects for constructing the current system that we live in right now. Literally, I mean, they passed the laws that we are still trying to undo. When we talk about criminal justice reform, whose laws do you think we're trying to reform? They're not Trump's laws. Okay, they're not Bush's laws or Obama's laws. They're all Biden's laws. The same bills that he passed one right after the other for a long period of time. Now they're out there screaming about this. We got to reform all of this stuff. And they are just taking the credit for all of this. They're sort of, basking in the glory. We're going to call Floyd. Hey, do you realize that Derek Chauvin and the entire police department there, a lot of their policies were developed as a direct consequence of the same crime bill that Joe Biden passed in 1994, right? It trickled all down. What we see in practice is he is the architect of that. So now he's on the phone. Oh, justice, justice, justice. It's like, hey, guys, there's a good argument that if Joe Biden didn't pass all of those bills and we had gone a different direction, maybe none of this stuff would have happened. Maybe our system would be much better than it is currently. Now we have to go back and reform a bunch of stuff that the guy in charge created. It's kind of like we're living in the Twilight Zone here, but that is what it is. We've got George Floyd and his family, of course, are reacting to it. So they're very happy about this, obviously. And you can't fault them for that, right? Their brother, son, right, father is not with us anymore in a very gruesome thing. He is, he's become the focus of everything in this country for the last year. Now we have Reverend Al Sharpton, who sort of parades in at the last minute. Where the hell has he been this entire time? He sort of flies in on his private jet, and now he just raises his hand up with the other people who are directly, impacted. We got Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, both in there. Everybody wants to be a part of this thing, and I'm going to show you why this is so irritating, because this is now becoming sort of a thing now. It's sort of that this is going to be a template that we're going to follow on all of the cases that happen this way. We have Ben Crump says, guilty. Painfully earned justice has finally arrived for George Floyd's family. Verdict is a turning point in history and sends a clear message on the need for accountability of law enforcement. Justice for Black America is justice for all America. And I agree with a lot of ideas here that we do need some justice reform and we do need some serious modifications and improvements in our legal system. But I do have some issues about how we got here. And so we're going to get into more of that, I'm sure. Biden to America says we cannot stop here. Joe Biden said on Tuesday that the system that the conviction can be a giant step forward. He declared it's not enough. Biden spoke from the White House hours after the verdict alongside Kamala Harris. So we have the biggest crime duo in the country are now out there talking about, we can't stop here, says Joe Biden. Biden and Harris called on Congress to act swiftly to address policing reform, including approving a bill named for Floyd, who died with his neck under Chauvin's knee. Beyond that, President said the entire country must confront hatred to change hearts and minds, as well as laws and policies. I can't breathe. Those were Floyd's last words, said Biden. We can't let those words die with him. We have to keep hearing those words. We must not turn away. We can't turn away. So he always does that thing. A measure of justice isn't the same as equal justice, said Kamala Harris. We are so relieved. Okay, so we've got those two people. Here is Merrick Garland now. Very short statement. Says the jury in the state trial of Derek Chauvin has fulfilled its civic duty and rendered a verdict convicting him on all counts. While the state's prosecution was successful, I know that nothing can fill the void that the loved ones of George Floyd have felt since his death. Justice Department has previously announced a federal civil rights investigation into the death of Floyd. This investigation is ongoing. So that's going to be continuing forward. So a lot of happiness out there. And then we have some people who are not happy, right? And a lot of people have been saying this for a long time also. What is it going to take to actually make these people happy? It's been a criticism that I have been lobbying for a long time now. I really don't know what the final sort of end point is for some of these movements like BLM. I mean, is it literally defund the police? Is that what we're talking about? If you're not happy with this stuff, if you're not happy that there was a conviction in Chauvin's case, what else do you think needs to be done? And I've several times on this channel proffered multiple solutions. I have several PowerPoint slides that just have lists of different solutions. And I'm open to them. I'm not saying that at all. I'm open to them, but I would like to see some proposals from some of these people. And if it is just defund the police, well, then we got to see some activity on that. I want to see some bills. I want to see some momentum, because right now we have just a lot of people who are pontificating about this stuff, and a lot of these people are elected officials. They're actually in Congress, so they have the power to do some of this stuff. We hear Jacob Frey in Minneapolis, who's sort of, complaining about it. You're the mayor, brother. Why don't you get out there and do something about this? You've got, AOC over here. You've got President Biden and Kamala Harris right now. Okay, Congress, go do something about that. So we'll see. We'll see if anything gets done. I doubt it. But here is AOC, who is also unhappy about this on her Instagram right outside the congressional building.
It's not justice. And I'll explain to you why it's not justice. It's not justice because justice is George Floyd going home tonight to be with his family. Justice is Adam Toledo getting tucked in by his mom tonight. Justice is when you're pulled over, there not being a...
All right, so she just goes, who knows what she's even talking about. Sounds like she's talking about a time machine. Justice is George Floyd going home to his family. Okay, well, we can't have that, okay? We're not living in bizarro land, fantasy world. George Floyd's not going to come home. Adam Toledo is not going to get tucked in. So what is your other solution? Is there anything else that you would like to propose that we can act on? And if it's just defund the police, let's see a bill. Get with the other, ladies there in your crew and do your thing and submit a bill so that we can see it, because I hear a lot of talking from a lot of these politicians and it's all useless. I'm pretty sick of it. So we have Nancy Pelosi now in one of the most condescending things I've ever seen. We saw this yesterday. We played it, but I was sort of scattered because I was trying to consume all the news. I got to watch it again, and I'm just sort of blown away that this is an elected person who is saying this. So she comes out. You probably saw this again. I just wanted to dunk on it one more time. Here is Nancy Pelosi saying, "Thank you, George Floyd, for dying." And she looks up at the sky. She's like, "Thank you, George. Thanks for dying, George." And then she goes out and listen to this. It's so friggin' patronizing. I can't even take it. She says he called out for his mom. Isn't that sweet? Looking around like he just did something funny, like a 4-year-old, right? Oh, look what he did. He just took the cap off that thing. That's great, right? Oh, isn't that sweet? And I mean, this folks, when I see this stuff, it's hard for me to sort of think that these people are even remotely genuine at all, right? And I know they're politicians. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt from time to time. Maybe she comes out here and really does give a statement about George Floyd, right? Awful thing. The whole thing's a tragedy, right? I do feel bad for Floyd. I do feel bad for Chauvin. I feel bad for the whole city. I feel bad for the whole country, because it's not good for anybody. The justice system is set back dramatically by these cases because everybody is upset about it. Nobody's really happy except a very small select few of people who then, when the next thing happens, they're not happy about it. AOC's also not happy. They're not going to wake up tomorrow and go, you know what? This is great. Derek Chauvin, that was justice, in fact. That he got what he deserved. He got convicted on all 3 counts. Therefore, I have some faith in the justice system. Let's get back to business. Maybe the next time that a white officer kills a black person, maybe we give that officer the benefit of the doubt, or the justice system. Maybe not even the officer. Maybe the system. We just say, well, the system worked this time, so we have a little bit more faith in it now. Is that going to happen as a result, as a consequence of the Derek Chauvin convictions? No, of course not. Right? It's not going to get any better. They're going to complain about the next one. We're going to talk about this in the next segment. We have a legitimate shooting that happened with this Ma'Khia Bryant young woman, and we already see it, right? The narrative is starting back up again. So it's like you can't win. So here is Nancy Pelosi now, who I want to just say, look, maybe she's going to come out and be an actual human being for 30 seconds. She can't even muster that. Here she's saying, "Thanks for dying, George. Appreciate it. Also, that was so sweet. You know how you were calling out from your mom. Here's Nancy. This is the most powerful person in our U.S. House of Representatives."
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out for your mom. I can't breathe. But because of you, And because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous with justice.
All right. So as though that, George Floyd sort of woke up and said, you know what, justice in America needs some reform. I'm going to go sacrifice myself in the name of my country, right? That didn't happen. He was killed, right? He was killed or died in an altercation, however you want to, define that. The jury said he was killed by Derek Chauvin. That legally is the distinction here. That's why he was convicted. Now, we've got some questions that we got to get to over at locals.com. And our first one comes in from National Populist. Says, how significant is the Maxine Waters threat for an appeal? Is there any path to mistrial after a verdict? So you're asking basically if there's any way that we can unring this bell, or the defense can unring this bell. And the answer really, in my opinion, is no. I think, a lot of people out there, I've seen some takes out there. Let me disclaimer this first and foremost. I am not an appeals attorney. Okay. We don't do that. We will very, very rarely do it. And typically we'll bring on sort of external help. There are specific attorneys who are very good at appeals, and they know how it's a whole set of separate set of rules. And it's kind of a thing, right? Even if we want to appeal a case, we'll bring in and hire other attorneys to help us with that, just because it's kind of a specialized area. If you don't just appeal something because you don't like the verdict, you have to find a basis for it, right? If it's a guilty and you want to not guilty, you can appeal it, but it's not going to go anywhere unless you have something that you can really sink your teeth into. So on this, this issue about Maxine Waters and about her statement and about really any of the due process issues that were taking place throughout the trial, whether it's the city council settlement or Maxine Waters or anybody else sort of ranting and raving about this, I think Jacob Frey, or I think that's his name, the Minneapolis mayor, also said something before the jurors were sequestered. So, the list goes on and on. Is this going to be reversed on appeal? I highly, highly, highly doubt it, right? And I've seen a lot of commenters out there saying that, yes, it should. In all reality, criminal cases are very rarely reversed on an appeal, and you need to find something that you can sink your teeth into that was sort of a clear error on the underlying case. Right? It has to be more significant than you just didn't like the outcome, or you thought that maybe it felt unfair. So in other words, what I'm saying is, they would have to find something that Maxine Waters did that may have impacted, literally the case in one way or another. Some juror mentions it, or there's some evidence that comes to light that this did have an impact other than it was just said. Okay, we all know it was said, but what was the consequence in the courtroom on the trial? They're going to have to find something in order for that appeal to have any teeth, and I'm not sure that they're going to, which is why I think it's probably a long shot. E. Dantes says, Robert, may have missed your comments on your feeling on Chauvin. If you were on the jury, how would you have voted? Is your opinion different now than before the trial started? So it's a great question. So I would have voted not guilty on all three counts. I still stand by that statement. I thought that was the legally correct answer here, and the reason why I say that. And yes, my opinion did change. My opinion changed pretty dramatically from May of last year, where you can go back on this channel and watch me go through the George Floyd video, right? I was very upset about it. I said, this is insane. It looked like he was asphyxiated. It looked like he was killed with Chauvin's knee on the neck, right? And I am sort of spring-loaded to find fault with police officers. I am a criminal defense attorney. I know I have a bit of a blind spot on that. I know I have to affirmatively sort of, set those emotions aside and think about law enforcement and our justice system in a positive light, from time to time, just to sort of put that hat on, because I wear defense lawyer hat all day, right? I have a whole business about that. We have 20 something people here who are working towards that end. We're very good about, I'm passionate about it. So I'm sort of that disposition. So before I knew anything about the case, when I was listening to or watching the video, and that's all I knew, it looked like Chauvin murdered Floyd. No question about it, right? That was sort of my instincts right out of the gate. But I didn't know a lot back then. We know a lot more now, and we know a lot that the government's witnesses have even corroborated for us. In particular, that Dr. Baker, the government's expert witness who actually did the autopsy and filled out the medical death certificate, said specifically the cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest as a result of a number of different things. Of those, of the things, of all the factors that were on that certificate, we had some pretty big problems that, in my opinion, create some very reasonable doubt. Not doubt that is sort of, fleshed out in, carbon monoxide poisoning or something like that. If the basis for, in my opinion, a not guilty verdict on all three counts, if I was sort of placing that or hanging my hat on carbon monoxide, I would say that was a stretch. Okay. Derek Chauvin is not innocent because carbon monoxide came out of the exhaust pipe and went into Floyd's mouth and killed Floyd, right? I don't believe that for a second. It was one of the defense theories, but it was a bad theory. But if we're going to give the defendant the benefit of the doubt in these cases, as we are required legally to do, given the fact that we have the presumption of innocence still in this country, and given the idea that we have this concept of beyond a reasonable doubt, which means if you have any doubt that is based in reason as to the defendant's innocence or guilt, if you just doubt it, I'm not positive about that, then that is enough for an acquittal. It's doubt based in reason. And when we heard the government's own expert witnesses, there was a lot of doubt there. Dr. Baker disagreed with Dr. Tobin as to the cause, mechanism, manner of death. Their own expert witnesses disagreed about that, which is why they had to bring in the cardiologist the day after Dr. Baker testified. So on the government side, their own witnesses disagreed about the cause of death. George Floyd, his arteriosclerosis combined with his hypertensive heart disease caused major problems with his heart. He already, had a lot of heart problems prior in 2019. His blood pressure was like 216 over 160, and he had a last-minute ingestion case back then. So if we're going to just analyze this from a causal factor, what was the cause of death for George Floyd? And we have the government's own expert witnesses, not Dr. Baker. There was another woman who came in, and she was a medical expert witness, and she said specifically, if we would have found Floyd at home dead, and we opened up his heart, we would have blamed the heart for it. It was that bad. The heart alone would have been sufficient to kill Floyd. Similarly, let's say the heart was fine. Let's say that all of that was okay. If Floyd was dead and they found 11 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl in his blood, that was sufficient for death as well. All of those things were bona fide contributing factors that were listed on the medical certificate, death certificate. And so if you start to analyze the different causal factors, and remember, causation was one of the key elements in all three of those charges. Before you ever talk about culpable negligence or, felony, whatever, any of those things, assault and intent and, transferred intent and all of those things. Causation, Chauvin caused death. Chauvin caused death. Causation, I have a huge problem with it. And I think that beyond a reasonable doubt is such a high standard. There was plenty of doubt in reason in this case, based in reason in this case, that they're just, in my opinion, justifies holding that standard. I know it's not a popular opinion. I know that people disagree with it. I know the jury disagrees with it. But it is, I think, critically important that we recognize that. If Derek Chauvin put his knee on George Floyd's neck and we learn today, perfect heart, no problems with the heart, no fentanyl, no prior methamphetamine use, no last-minute ingestion, no pills in the car, no pills with saliva and DNA that came out of his mouth in the back of the police car, no 2019 prior, no heart history of being over 216 over 160. If all of those things were absent and Chauvin did what he did on Floyd, well, yeah, of course he would have killed him, right? Because that is the single causal factor of death. But that wasn't the case. We have all sorts of other factors that were sufficient to kill him. But they blame Chauvin for it because of the video and what they saw. Now, I'm a defense lawyer, so like I said, I'm spring-loaded to side with the defense. I have no love at all for Derek Chauvin, as I mentioned. And you can go back, I look at his facial expressions, and it makes my blood boil watching him because he has this smug arrogance about him. I even saw this in court, and I was I didn't comment on it as we were going through the trial, but I would see his facial expressions. And when the judge asked him if anybody promised you or threatened you or you under duress, when he was asking him specifically about not testifying, Chauvin's face was like, no, it was like a smug smirk. He's like, no, Judge, like, nobody puts me under duress. Okay. No, I'm not under duress. Like this is easy. Like, I know where this is going. And a part of me believes that, right? Why is he writing his attorney's number on his hand? He might have thought, I'm getting acquitted on all charges. And this was a blindside to him. He goes, well, I don't even know your number, bro. Let me write this down real fast. And so that sort of arrogance, I think, translated. I saw that on the video. I saw his knee going into his neck with his hands in his pocket, just looking at people. And I've seen that look on officers a lot. I see it in clients we represent. We watch body camera videos. I see arrogant, smug officers treating people like garbage all the time. And it makes my blood boil. And I have no love for Derek Chauvin at all. I'm not going to lose any sleep over the fact that he got convicted on this thing. I am him personally. Okay. Right. Derek Chauvin. I got no love for the guy. I have a lot of concerns though about how our justice system functioned in this trial, because there was plenty of reasonable doubt here. I mean, what else do you need? There's fentanyl, prior meth use, major heart problems, 90% blockage in one of the arteries. And the government's own witnesses confirmed that. They disagreed with themselves. We even had use of force experts disagree, Jody Steiger and the law professor who testified the last on the government's case. Plenty of reasonable doubt. And it's concerning to me when you have a dog pile that happens on anybody, whether it's Chauvin or anybody else, because this happens in this country where innocent people are in Chauvin's position. Truly, whether you think he's innocent or not, you might think he was, right? And that the standard has not been met. And now, this is a template. We're going to see this again. We're going to see that this type of behavior from the media, from the courts, from our politicians is okay. It's almost to be expected. And we're going to talk about this in the next segment, because Michaela is now going through the same thing. And you can already see the gears turning. The pistons are warming up. Everybody's getting geared up for this next George Floyd season 2. Police murdering people in America, season 2. We're going to be outraged about everything. So that's my issue, right? The final outcome. All right, the jury listened to the facts. They made a decision. I respect the jurors. Okay, they heard what they heard. And they made a decision. And I'm not in that jury room. And I don't know what the situation is like down there at the scene. But as a defense lawyer, I've got concerns anytime that there's a dog pile in this country, anytime that the entirety of the nation just sort of orients themselves towards one person, and we're just going to destroy that person. It reminds me of the mob, in the Coliseum or like in Gladiator. The mob is fickle, right? They're angry at this person. They're angry at that person. As a society, we have to recognize that anytime that happens, that is extremely dangerous. The person who's at the receiving end of that focus, of that laser-like visceral reaction from a country, they need protection and defense more than anybody in this country. When everybody is totally aligned to destroy somebody, that's when they need protection the most. We got to make sure that we are upholding the mechanisms that protect our justice system at that moment, because at that moment, that's when people want to start to bend the rules. I already saw that in the Floyd case. I saw a lot of people, and a lot of these people are Hollywood commentators and things, who were saying, well, what do we even need a trial for in the George Floyd case? We already know what happened. We saw the video. That should be all that we need. I'm going, no. That's not how this works. Our legal system, we still have due process, the presumption of innocence, the right to trial, the right to counsel, and a lot of other very important fundamental rights in this country. But people want to just bend the rules because they think that they're not that important. We don't need them in this case, so let's just get rid of them. Well, what happens the next time this goes down the pike? What happens the next time we have a person in that situation who is in fact innocent and society wants to just rub their faces in the ground? Well, we can't let them do it, and we're not. And so that's why I just want to make sure that we're holding the line on the reasonable doubt standard. I thought there was plenty of reasonable doubt in the Chauvin case, even though I have no love whatsoever for Chauvin himself. I have love for the reasonable doubt standard and the presumption of innocence, and I'm not sure that we saw much of that in this trial. Justice First says, yesterday you seemed somewhat clinical and quick to move on, but for those of us traumatized to think a man who is not guilty as charged could end up doing significant time, could you offer any tidbits of hope for Chauvin or for our justice system? So hopefully Justice First, I sort of just kind of went through that a little bit. I have a lot of concerns for our justice system. I will tell you that. I tend to be kind of a hopeful person, but I'm not real sure what's happening right now, because there is a big segment of this country that is sort of reorienting towards a different perspective here. And I'm gonna let me table this one, because I'm gonna tell you what I think might be happening in the next segment, because we're seeing a very similar situation to Floyd's case sort of now bubble up. And I'm seeing a very coordinated, sort of orchestrated conversation going back the other direction from people in very high positions of power, like Valerie Jarrett. And I think that they may be telegraphing where this justice system thing might be going. So let me table that one. Derek Chauvin, I think it's close to the end of the line for him. If I had to guess, yes, he'll appeal it, but I don't have much optimism that there's going to be anything that the appeals court does on reverse, unless, right, anything could happen. A juror could come out, a week from now and say, somebody in there was threatening me and whatever. And that would obviously, all bets are off the table at that point in time. But the justice system it's on rocky waters right now. And we're going to explain, I think, why in a little bit. LT13 says, did you see Floyd's girlfriend was Daunte Wright's dean or something in high school? No, I did not see that. No, that's crazy. That is a weird coincidence. I did not see that, but that is an interesting little tidbit, LT. We have Sharon Quidney in the house, says, this is an indication of a real change. All right, the death of due process, equal protection, and especially the presumption of innocence. It's the triumph of mob rule. Yeah, it certainly feels like that, right? And you see a city that created an environment supported by their local politicians that made it very hard to provide a fair trial, in my opinion. The jurors literally were walking back and, from that building, from the court building, in the middle of this whole environment. It's hard not to be persuaded. You have Patriot Musk says, Rob, are you happy with the verdict? If I can be honest about it, I'm sort of indifferent really about the whole thing. I'm not happy or sad about it. I sort of expected that. I was expecting kind of a guilty on all counts. I sort of felt that the wave of the country was going that direction. As soon as I heard that it was decided in like 8 hours, I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be guilty across the board. Now, legally, I said yesterday, I think the correct outcome, if I were a juror, I would say the correct outcome is there's plenty of doubt, and I would have voted to acquit on all three charges based on the evidence that we heard. And I spent a lot of time covering it, and I've got clips and everything. So we may be actually trying to assemble sort of a highlight reel of the trial, and maybe we'll make even an argument in there. But we'll see. I can't say I'm happy or disappointed about it. It's sort of clinical. I sort of watched it, expecting that this was probably going to be the outcome. I would say I'm quite jaded about how I feel about how people interpret reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence. And I've experienced that regularly as a criminal defense attorney, right? People sort of presume that you're guilty and that you have to convince the court and the jurors that you're innocent. And that's not the case at all. And the judge can tell people that, can tell them to their face, hey, you can't, this person is innocent. And they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. And they just don't get it, right? Because they've been so conditioned by movies and law enforcement and the courts to think that anybody who's sort of on the receiving end in a position of power, if the power structure is kind of crashing down on one particular person, everybody thinks, well, they deserve it. That's the system, right? They must have done something wrong. And then we have to sort of try to reverse that as defense lawyers when really it's not our burden. It's supposed to be on them, but practically it's not. It's on us. So when I see stuff like this happen, I have a lot of concern for our justice system. And I also have concern that I think that people in this case don't really realize what they're cheering. It's kind of a strange, the hats are reversed. The roles are reversed in this case. You have let's say the African-American community, right? You have BLM, you have anybody who's out there protesting for Daunte Wright, George Floyd, whatever. They are thrilled that the prosecutors won in this case. And I'm thinking, like today, those same prosecutors, that same prosecutor's office, they are prosecuting some of the protesters. They're prosecuting some of, other drug offenses, like George Floyd has been was basically facing drug charges or counterfeiting charges or disorderly conduct charges. In other words, the police are going to go out and arrest more people from their communities, and they're just thrilled with the prosecutor's office, which is sort of like a reversal, right? Typically, the left doesn't like law enforcement today anyways. And the right doesn't like defense attorneys. They're all in favor of prosecution and law enforcement. So now the traditional conservatives are sort of going, this is ridiculous. What do you mean the government can come out here and do this? They can just convict an innocent person. And this is what I've been saying for a long time. Yes, they can. Conservatives, this is sort of a wake-up call. This is what this looks like on a regular basis. The government has a ton of power, and citizens in our society, they don't even hesitate. They'll convict you all day long. If you're a conservative and you're thinking that the reasonable doubt standard or the presumption of innocence is a proper check on a tyrannical, authoritarian, overly bureaucratic, endless power, monopolistic government, if you think that those things are going to protect you from it, I got a rude wake-up call for you. And this may have been that. Okay, you saw what happened. You saw that there was plenty of doubt thrown out there, but the system just said, nah, bye, not even going to listen to you. And the citizens in the jury panel Took him 8 hours. Didn't even have to think about it. Jen McClellan says Pelosi saying Floyd's name is synonymous with justice must really sting for the victims of his armed robberies. I don't think he deserved to die, but he's being made out as some kind of a saint, and that just ain't right. Yeah, I mean, he's got a square now. They're going to pass a bill now, and I agree with you. I don't think that he deserves to die, but is he Saint America? No, no, he was not. And so when people get out there and they start trying to make something out of nothing, and they want to puff everything up into something that it isn't, are we having conversations in reality land anymore? We have Sharon Quidney says, you ask what these people want. They want a totalitarian communist dictatorship with racial injustice as the basis for the revolution instead of class struggle. This is stated agenda and the founders of BLM. Yeah, so I think that is actually exactly right? This sort of racial struggle, this revolution. And I think you sort of hit it on the head. I was going to get to this in a later segment, but the idea would be that law enforcement is just no longer legitimate. It's not a legitimate function of the state anymore. And it's sort of dividing on a racial barrier. We have the white police officers who are part of the white patriarchy, a part of that original sin that Joe Biden talks about, part of the stain on America. That's white law enforcement officers. That's our current justice system. And so what we're going to see when we get to the Bryant shooting is this predisposition to default to anything an officer does is wrong. Okay, because we're going to see that in the next segment. He shoots a woman that has a knife and is in the process of stabbing somebody. And this officer is getting skewered about it. When in my opinion, it was the right thing to do. But the question is, should an officer be doing anything? Should an officer be responding to this stuff? That's the logical extension of defund the police. The cop, look, if the cop shouldn't have even been there, then he shouldn't have shot, right? And that's actually where this is going. All right, we're going to get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. Good question. We have Norovira says, all those comments are very inflammatory to all the people who thought Chauvin was not guilty and Floyd was a dead man walking. With the amount of drugs he did and his health would have killed him within months. He was not going to go home today. And if it's not enough that his family got $27 million of taxpayers' money. Horrible thing to say, but they are not unhappy about the way he died. The other option would be that he would have died in prison in the next few months. Yeah, that's a spicy comment there, Norovira, as is the case. You got a lot of spice, and we're glad that you're here. We have Hack Consulting says, thank you, Nancy Pelosi, for finally being a truthful politician. Glad to see you openly showing how you turn everything into a political weapon. Thanks, George Floyd. Thanks for dying. Thanks for dying, George. We have Ma Fox says, I'm all too glad to say the left is being horrendously hypocritical, being happy with this opinion. I actually care about justice reform. Felony murder rules are one of the first on the chopping block. Minnesota's felony murder needs to go, period. They'd have agreed with this, but hey, now that is helping convict Chauvin. Yeah, no, look, I agree with you, Ma. I think that you're right. It's kind of a weird thing that something that is just a tragedy across the board is people were jumping out of their seats. Yeah, man's going to prison for killing another man. Yeah, what are we celebrating that for? And then it's sort of premature celebration. Like it's a celebration that there was justice done, but then they all come out and say, well, this isn't justice. This is just the start of something else. Okay, well, then what are you so happy for? We have Blazing Gun says, can an appellate court declare a mistrial or retry Chauvin, or is that not legally possible? It is legally possible. I mean, basically what they do is they remand it back down. It's called a remand. So you'll appeal an issue. You'll say, the judge, let's say, for example, after the settlement came out, the judge, I don't think, did the judge voir dire everybody again? Let's say, I don't know about the settlement, but let's say about yes, the judge did voir dire everybody again. The judge started to impanel people. The settlement came out. The judge called several people back, questioned them again because he thought it was appropriate. Then the trial moved forward. Okay, so let's take that as a standard. When there's a big news story, the judge brought the jurors back and asked them questions about it. Hey, did you hear about this $27 million settlement? Several jurors said, yeah, we did. And I think somebody said, yeah, I did, and I'm not going to be impartial anymore. Judge booted that person. Okay, so in jury selection, judge gets a big news story, thinks it's appropriate to re-question the jurors, and then throw some of them out when they said they can't be impartial anymore. Then the trial is ongoing, and this happens again. Maxine Waters runs her mouth, starts screaming about, get more confrontational unless there's a guilty verdict. Trial is still going on. And at that point, the jury, I don't think, has been sequestered yet, right? I think it was like in the middle of closing arguments. So now, at this time, the judge, does he do what he did the last time this happened and re-voir dire all the jurors? No, he didn't do that, right? So, well, no, I told him to not watch the news. I told him to stay off the internet, so we're just going to leave it at that. Do you know why he did that? Because he probably knows that if he would have called them in, somebody would have said, yeah. And then, or maybe several of them, and then he would have had to throw them off the bench, and they would have had to have been a mistrial. And the case was so far down the line that judge didn't want to do this over again. Once you sort of get over the tipping point in a trial, now it's like, well, we're just going to finish this thing. If there's a problem, the appeals court can deal with it. So that's what this judge did. And so if there's really any argument, I think that is a pretty good one. That the judge, when there was a big news story, he asked the jurors about it once. Then it happened again. He didn't do it again. That's a different standard. Why is that? Appeal, say the jurors may have been, improperly biased. The judge broke his own standards. Say we want a new trial. If the appeals court agrees, remand that sucker back down. Do this whole thing again. Maybe in a different venue. Probably get a different verdict. Hack Consulting says, the only thing I think we need to change is that no one understands beauty or stops to look for it. Everyone is trying to change the world. Why don't we stop and find something nice to appreciate, whether it is related to anything or we'll never see again? Why don't we just take a second to see something and then try to figure out why it caught our eye? It's a beautiful comment there, Hack Consulting. And there's a rule in this book I think it's Beyond Order by Jordan Peterson. I think it's Rule 5, but he talks about creating one room in your home that's the most beautiful room of anything that you have in your life. It's something like that. It's obviously put much better. Create one room in your home that's the most beautiful room in your home. And it's really a part of this concept, right? As human beings, we sort of grow up and mature out of beauty. We stop looking for it. You take a 3 or 4-year-old, right? Everything is beautiful. Everything they see is mesmerizing. They're awestruck everywhere they turn. Everything you turn on, everything you hand, oh my gosh, everything's beautiful and amazing. Then as we get older, I've seen that before, right? The Grand Canyon, who cares, right? There's a river, and no big deal. And you just kind of ignore it. So what Jordan Peterson says is, hey, you got to get in touch with that beauty. Go find a piece of artwork and spend some money on it. Spend some time on this thing. Go and, go to an art gallery, look around, spend 10 hours looking at these things, find something that is beautiful, check in with it every day. And I'm in the process of doing that right now based on that rule. I think it's Rule 5. Check it out. Great book, Beyond Order from Jordan Peterson. Nadar Blasier says, maybe this will wake people up to finally realize that innocent until proven guilty hasn't been a standard for us little folks for a long time now. Maybe all the media coverage will make people mad enough to do something about it. Well, I don't know, man. I think that they're kind of doing cartwheels over this stuff. And not good. Not good because it's a standard. That standard is going to be applied in other cases. Okay, the next time it's not going to be Chauvin in the defendant's chair. It's going to be somebody like George Floyd. Not that many cops get charged with crimes. A lot of people who are addicted to opioids and have prior criminal records and who are passing counterfeit bills, yeah, they get charged a lot more than the Derek Chauvins are. And if the burden of proof and the presumption of innocence are watered down in this case, guess where that ends up? In the other cases. And they're going to have to deal with those consequences. All right, so that is Derek Chauvin.